pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, acknowledge the presence of any Indigenous colleagues in the room here today or online, and say that, as we well know, all these places have always been places of learning, teaching and research. This is a very special time. It's very rare that you get 2.5 hours where you just get to think about yourself and reflect on yourself and how great you are, and Marnie warmed you up for that. I never not listened to Marnie and learn something. So what I learned is we have a lot in common. My discipline background is law, and we use footnotes, so yay for footnotes. I don't know what the rest of you disciplines are actually doing on a daily basis. And I also started as a first in family casual tutor at, I know we've got Charles Darwin colleagues on the line, but when I started up in Darwin, it was the University College of the Northern Territory, and then it became the Northern Territory University. Now it's Charles Darwin, so I'm quite old. I think it was the essence of that. So I was told that Marnie was giving, this isn't moving forward. Oh, yeah, okay. I was told that Marnie was doing a bit of history, which she very cleverly interwoven. And you see, I'm not as confident as Marnie to start with. So I thought I'd do a bit of who, what, am I, was I, or whatever. It might look like it's going to have been linear, but my overwhelming recollection is it's been very roller coastery and a lot of losing along the way. So I'm a law academic. I failed at my first attempt to get up to senior lecturer. I was appointed to associate professor and professor primarily on the basis of teaching. The Vice-Chancellor used to grade you on a 1 to 10 scale, and he used to like grading teachers down, but would never put a researcher, so teacher who was claiming research, he'd grade them down. But the researcher who were doing teaching you wouldn't send them down below a 6 out of 10 because. So there's a lot of firsts, I think, in what I've done. So I remember having to go to the associate professor panel with the whole 13 people, with my dean having told me that the professoriate did not support my associate professor application. And then I had to explain, which was Marnie's point, about my triple dipping into teaching, because back in the day, that was the greatest sin ever. And I just did this teaching piece, where I also did some service thing, but that was teaching, and I also did scholarship of learning and teaching, but that was teaching. So I had to explain to this great array of 13 people around the council table what it was that I thought that I was doing. Anyway, I did get up, so that's a happy story. Got up to professor. I've done some learning and teaching service roles, and I've had some awards, so I've been there. Which again, that good on me, clever me, except that I was a finalist in 2001 for the Teaching Award. And at that time in Canberra at Parliament House, the finalists lined up along the side. And then the winner, the lucky winner, got called up onto stage, and the loser got to stand there awkwardly.
In the Academy Award moment.
I know, so that's me. That was so I did get an award. It's a bit so, and that was probably no one even has ever seen one of those. That was one of the early back ones in the day, which lovely Peggy Splat from the whatever Carrick Institute, I think it was then, potentially, used to wear white gloves. She was so respectful of the awards and hand them out. But anyway. So I've had some discipline publications. I always felt like I had to keep my discipline hand in because I had to continually be explaining to people what I was doing about learning and teaching. Did some scholarship of learning and teaching publications, had some grand success back in the day, presented internally, externally, nationally, internationally, in law and in higher education and in legal education. So these are the first things. I got bullied into applying for a Carrick Fellowship back in the day on first year experience because the call came out, or as these things do, right at exam time marking. And I had, and this is the story about history and why history is so important. The reason I got interested in first year teaching, I was just explaining to the colleagues on the line from Charles Darwin, is because I was a first in family, just like Marnie, first in family, rural, regional, remote, low SES student who lived in a residential college, who did law at a group of 8 institution, and the match made in heaven, of course, had no idea what I was doing. So I had this great, wonderful, terrible first year experience. What kept me at university was the fact that I was in a residential college and part of a community of learners. But I didn't know that's what that was. So that experience, and then as a fractional first year teacher, teaching 1,100 first year law students, 50% with a 1-year-old and 3-year-old at home, 26 staff members rotated through that subject that I was supposed to be managing between the sessional staff and the full-time staff because it was a first year subject. No one ever committed. That's why I got interested in first year teaching. I just thought there has to be a better experience both for staff and students. And that's part of your story, I think. So think about, what the motivations are. So I got the fellowship, but we were the first ones to do it. When I got the fellowship, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic, who was a wonderful man but did bully me into applying for it, said, well, there must be something in this first year stuff then, Sally. I'll appoint you to be the inaugural first year director. And I said, oh, great, I've got this list of, resources and staff that I want. And he said, no, you're the resource. So I said, great. But anyway, so that was a good experience. Discipline scholar law, again, a lot of firsts, but with a great cohort of colleagues. Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic, got a Career Achievement Award. Just to establish my credentials with you, I have served on the Australian Awards for University Teaching Program Award Committee for a number of years, and I now chair the Career Achievement Award. And for 2024, we gave it to Professor Tracy Bunda from University of Queensland, amazing awardee. I also try to prove up my equity credentials on a regular basis. I chair the Grants and Fellowships Committee for the now Australian Centre for Student Equity and Success over in Perth. But my enduring thing is lots of tears along the way and lots of stomping around corridors and being called effing stupid B-word by colleagues in the corridor. Imagine a colleague saying that in the corridor by one of my who didn't approve of my attempts to disrupt first year. So it's not an easy thing. So it's a bit of a roller coaster. But then also I couldn't resist. I do a lot of pro bono. Marnie said about paying it forward. You must pay it forward. I have had amazing, spectacular people support me completely out of the blue and completely in ways that they probably thought were very little. The first, I presented at a legal education conference at Bond University, I can't even remember when, and a professor whom I greatly admired, a great legal educator, wrote me an email and said, I was walking past the room and saw you presenting and I just ducked in for a few minutes and I just wanted to say. So, don't ever underestimate what the power of that is, and when you get it, you make sure you pay it forward. So I'm going to pay it forward because I do this needed now in learning and teaching, and I've got a colleague here that's going to send through a piece. But if any of you, because it doesn't look not bad on you, if I didn't do enough double negatives then, on your CV or on your promotion application or whatever, I'm very happy to take. They're short, no more than 1,000 words, preferably somewhere between 600 and 800 words, with links written in a conversational manner, talking about exactly what you're going to talk about in your application. So if you'd like to send me one, I still have my JCU email, sally.kift@jcu.edu.au. I'd send you the brief, which is essentially what I just told you. That's my way of paying it forward, because there isn't enough avenues for not the traditional voices to be talking about good learning and teaching deeds in the sector. Right. Same as Marnie. So we didn't actually collude on this, but luckily we are telling the same story, which is probably unimpressive. A nomination that tells a persuasive story. I can't say that. Whether it's a promotion application, teaching award in particular, what is your hook? Where is your coherent narrative of the issue that you identified and then addressed? As I said, these PowerPoints, Stephanie will package them up as a PDF and send them around to you. So just, if you can bear to listen to me, then you can get all the detail later on. And you'll see I just present very differently from Marnie. It's very unrelaxed and lots of words on a page. But anyway, that's my meta-narrative going on in my head. With compelling evidence of impact. So at this level, and see, this is the hard thing, at this level, everyone's good, as you would expect. So what makes you the next stage? What makes you, if you don't want to call yourself excellent, but what makes you good? So what's your hook? What's your pitch? I was just speaking to a colleague in Charles Darwin University who is, and I'm sorry if I'm going to get this not completely correct, but they've got developing an escape room and a Minecraft experience for neurodiverse students in education. Yeah, so it's a lay-down misère. That's right, you're hitting all the boxes, and if you get escape room in the title, then I think you've got the hook. That doesn't mean you don't have the substance elsewhere, but remember, you're trying to tell the story and get some interest in there. So how is what you identified for improvement and what you did in response outstanding or excellent? So just try and think about it in that way and tell your story about it. So in your context, you don't have to do all of these. I'm just different ways into trying to get you to think about what you have done, and I'm sure it's there, is significant because it's had a tangible impact on students, or leading because it's leading in the discipline. So, if someone did an escape room in law, we'd all lose our shit because they're going, whoever does that? So that would be, maybe it's common in IT, but probably not in education, and certainly not in law. So it's big in the discipline or the context. It's beyond, and this was the question that came, beyond the usual day-to-day. And you do find that out by talking to your mentors in the moment. And your students will be telling you as well, which was Marnie's point, I think. It needs to be scholarly and evidence-based, so it demonstrates that theory to practice development over enhancement, that it's purposeful and reflective. So again, you tried something, it doesn't have to have worked 10,000%. Randy Bass wrote this piece about teaching as a problem, and the problem with teaching as a problem, essentially. You've got a problem in science, or in the big research thing, you're great, I've got a problem, I'm going to investigate it. You've got a problem when you're teaching, it's almost as if, well, don't tell anyone, just try and fix it. But this is problem identification. You've identified a problem and you've had a first go at it, but it's an iterative action research exercise. You will be inevitably enhancing your response to that. And has it had sustained impact? Because we're looking for it over time. So this is what you need some evidence of. So it's continually improving. And it's capturing your voice. This is your application and the voice of your students. So this is about you and your students and their learning. And you know all these things. I'm just giving you, just giving you prods and reminding you, I think. So foregrounding the students' learning, you do have to, something of your teaching philosophy has to come through, and that you've been reflective in relation to that. What your aspirations are potentially for your student and your discipline. So, I might just want to, make law students ethical beings to be compared with what's going on in the US with lawyers that are caving to Trump. That might be my aspiration. What's my scholarly learning journey around that? It has to be evidence-based, and you would hopefully be thinking about how you might engage in some scholarly activities around that, influencing curriculum design elsewhere in your school, in your subject, and you might go the stage further of publishing or presenting on it and doing some scholarship of teaching and learning. And how do I demonstrate the arc of what I'm doing? Because it's a narrative arc, and I did this and I went a bit astray, and then I rebalanced and I did it this way, so that it's been improving over time. And then you need compelling evidence of how your intervention was effective against each of the assessment criteria. And you can't fudge that. You are going to have to address the criteria. So think about your evidence from a range of sources that corroborate your nomination. Most compelling when, it's all of these things. Coherent and aligned to your narrative, of course. Drawn from multiple independent sources. I'm absolutely with Marnie. If there's anything that you want to say, like I'm a great teacher, I'll say that. People tell me I'm a great teacher. Well, that's great. I'd rather do a quote from someone. My head of school, my dean, my law firm partner, or my students, or my sessional teaching staff say that I've done something. Always better, I think, hearing it from a different person. A mix of quantitative and qualitative. Mix of quantitative and qualitative, and aligned with the scholarly base. You have to understand something about pedagogy. I'm sorry, you're just going to have to understand. Well, it's the edge you speak on. It's easy to, and a lot of what you do is instinctive. I've seen some good people get up, just being able to get up on their applications, just being able to talk about it, but you don't want to run that risk, I don't think. So again, if you're not completely attuned, what you know, because you're reflective, creative, intelligent practitioners of teaching, there'll be a scholarly base for it. So ask your friends and they'll be able to help you with that. So here's Liz Johnson, Professor Liz Johnson, who's just resigned as the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Education at Deakin University, who has been chair of the Citations Committee. This is from a 2022 presentation. All these resources are up on the Australian Awards for University Teaching site on the Universities Australia page. So she's just talking about the types of evidence. I'm just going to give you a couple of goes at different ways of thinking about the evidence you're collecting. So they could be perceptions, behaviours, outcomes. This is Liz's slide. She chairs the panel. So after all the assessments are done, they go up to a panel, and a panel makes the ultimate decision about which awards are going to get granted. So when you're collecting evidence, think about perceptions. What do people think, and what the sources of that might be? Surveys, feedback, reviews or comments. What behaviours did you notice or could you provide as evidence because they participated or they engaged? What happened? Did grades and marks increase? Were there achievements? Were there skills attained? And the impact, what changed and did it last? So she's talking there about different, new or different graduate outcomes in terms of employment, new and different sustained learning teaching experience, independent evaluation, peer review. So just some ideas and different ways of conceptualising it, because I like putting words on a page in boxes. So I'm giving you sources of evidence. So here's some sources of evidence from students. Same sorts of things Marnie was talking about, but they're just on a page now. So think about, of course, student evaluations, but as we all know, that is but one, that's an input of one. Interviews, focus groups, formal, informal. Students often send, well, don't probably as often as we would wish. Occasionally they send you an email and congratulate you. So, unsolicited student feedback. As Marnie said, as students are doing their logs or their journals, their discussion forums, they're saying things in there. Self-reported knowledge gains, evidence of learning, because you do your pre and a post test. If you've got a strong, I always think you change your learning and teaching, you do this much work. If you get an ethics application and then you write it up, you've still done this same bit, but you just started it here with an ethics application and then you've written it up and you've got another piece entirely. But anyway, thinking about the pre and post tests, the data, which could be the big data about attrition, retention, pass rates, grade distributions, graduate outcomes. Learning analytics, we've got them all over the place now, so you can see what students are engaging in. There's evidence sitting there in your learning management system. Employer or workplace feedback, the students' work and achievements. So as Marnie said, now she's got senior public servants or something writing back to her saying they did her history lesson. I've never had anything quite so grand, but I did have students that were, working well in law firms and feeling like they were being a productive professional and it would reflect back on, that's all good stuff. Anything and everything, you can make it relevant. You've got peers that can provide stuff. So someone said, get someone to come and sit in on a class. don't just get them to sit in, get them to write a sentence or two. That's all you're talking about. For a citation, as I was just explaining to Charles Darwin colleague, I think the most limiting, if I'm right on this, the most limiting thing about the citation from my perspective is it's 4 pages. I can't write anything in 4 pages. So when you're looking for these other pieces of evidence, you're not looking for whole paragraphs. And when you're thinking about soliciting these pieces of evidence, which is completely appropriate, or hopefully garnering them and collecting them, you're really only wanting a sentence, 2 at the most, because you've got 5 assessment criteria, 5 assessment criteria under the 1 criterion that you can choose to focus on in a citation. Peer recognition, uptake of your learning and teaching approaches. So, someone might have, so I used to get my students to self-assess, which was modern back in the day, in the middle of the semester in first year law for tutorial participation. And then used to have the pleasure of saying to the young men who all rated themselves as 10 out of 10, saying, politely, you don't necessarily demonstrate that you have contributed to the extent that. But anyway, that was something novel that I did. And other people then started to do that in first year subjects, because we're trying, for the reason that we're trying to get them to engage and participate in the process in the first year, whereas it's the substance that you're looking for in a later year. Benchmarking your outcomes, influencing school, faculty, university policy. The evidence can be as quite broad ranging if you can point to it that you've had impact on it. And don't forget industry engagement and feedback. So if you've done work in it with accreditation in terms of you're getting your course, your program of study accredited, but also you might be working with an accreditation body or with professionals. And then you're a valid source of evidence as well in terms of the various ways, the fact that you've been acknowledged by a formal or informal leadership role, the contributions that you've made to your discipline, to your school, to your faculty, by mentoring internally or externally through you can point to evidence in a teaching journal portfolio, of course through published scholarship of teaching and learning and other disseminations, and as a self-reflective way. So there's the 3 legs to the persuasive application stool: what the intervention was, the context for it, why you did it, how you know that it worked, what the outcomes and impact were, what changed and did it last, and then the evidence to support the claim. So what about you? You've got to think about the evidence you already have, think about what you can get, and you should start be thinking about that now because there's things you can do. You don't just sit there and go, oops, I haven't got any. No. You get active. And what strategies would you put in place to get different sorts of evidence? Not that you'd subvert your teaching process, of course, at all, but all students need to learn to be reflective. I think it's one of the greatest failings in the rest of the humanity at the moment, no reflection. So tips for success: get started early, because it takes time to do this, and it is an iterative exercise and a reflective one. Who will be your 2 good referees? You need to start thinking about that quite early. I think one of them's got to be internal, is my recollection, but don't, which is great, of course. But then think what you want for bang for buck from an external person. What do they add? How are you going to help them? So I'm sorry, people ask me a lot to write. Please don't write and ask me to be a referee for your promotion application. I'm just going to cry. I don't take that now without saying you're going to have to write me a good first draft. The reason I say that is because I try to spread the load, and I do it a lot, but I can't speak to your points, to your hooks, without you telling me what they are. It's like a little test. And I also can't speak to the specific words in your policy, in your promotion policy. Same deal here. You want to help your referee by saying, these are my hooks, and these are the words that we all have to hit, because they're the criteria. It's not an abstract exercise. If you're doing a Teaching Excellence Award, you can put in supporting application. I don't know how many people read the supporting application. I do a 3-minute thesis pitch, to be honest, because I think that might be an engaging way to do it. Mentors and critical friends, what's the timeline? And seriously, make it easy for the assessors. It's like a promotion application. And if you've ever think about think about putting yourself in the shoes of the assessor, who may or may not be in your discipline, may not know what education, what academic development units look like in universities because they've never worked in one. So you're making it as easy as possible for them to read and get your hooks and see your evidence. So all these things, do as I say, not as I do necessarily, see my slides. Addressing the criteria, signposting, headings, visual appeal, white space, use of figures, tables, graphs. You're trying to differentiate, I think, and get a critical friend to have a look at the narrative and see whether it's flowing. Does it tell a persuasive story? Have I got enough of the context in there? If you're reading out of the discipline, do you even understand what I'm talking about? What I did, what the framing was, what the results are, have I got enough evidence? And Marnie stole my thunder on this, always have a plan B. Remember when I was a loser in 2001? The best advice I got before I had the loser experience was think about what else you could do with this application. If it doesn't get up, what can I do with it? The only thing I would add to Marnie's list is it could also be a piece of scholarship of learning and teaching, to be honest. You're doing it hitting all the notes there. You've got an evidence-based, research-based, you had a problem, you identified a problem, you did something in response, you've got evidence that proved it worked. So it sounds like a scholarship of learning and teaching piece for me. So think about that. And in your in these blue folders, you've got those nomination writing tips and the how to present evidence of your claim, which has come off the AAUT slide on the Australian University Awards for Teaching. Look, I don't know whether this helps. I did this a long time ago, 2011. I just tried to have another look at it recently in an effort to be helpful. Everything comes from a place of trying to help. It's obviously not this linear, and I'm not, and it's a hard row, but it's a very productive and rewarding way to do it. So you're really going in terms of think about your impact or influence and how you demonstrate this, and it is of course not anywhere near this linear, and with the absence of an Office for Learning and Teaching that provides national teaching grants, that's a big problem. A lot of us back in the day got up on the basis of Office for Learning and Teaching opportunities, but there is a recommendation in the Australian Universities Accord report, recommendation 30, little h, Roman numerals 3, that says there will be a Learning and Teaching Council established under ATEC. Happy days. The Productivity Commissioner says that we should incentivise teaching by making some grants available, research-based teaching. Oh my God, Productivity Commissioner. So we might get something back at some point. But you start as a beginning teacher and you build you always have influence. It's just an expanding sphere of influence. I applied for my award when I was an Associate Dean, which was no particularly grand thing, a senior lecturer with 50% appointment, doing everything that was remotely associated with teaching and doing 50% teaching. So that was great. And I was worried because I thought, well, I'm not doing 100% teaching. That's not good. I've got to be a 100% teacher until my mentor said, but you're influencing students in a whole other way now through the work that you do with policy and quality assurance and setting standards and, doing templates and mentoring and coaching. So you just think about how all of this could be seen through a different lens. Anyway, you can have a ponder on this when you get the PowerPoints, if you like. And good luck to you. So, final thoughts. Good luck. Have fun. Don't forget to have fun. This should be fun. This should be fun. This is you thinking about your passion and your labour of probably unrequited love, and support each other. So that's it.